saving critically endangered snakes, and years of service to the environment are celebrated in today's story. It's James here from the Global Portrait Project, where I'm painting 193 portraits of 193 nationalities, with each subject having a positive environmental story. And this week I'll be showing you painting for country number 6, Antigua and Barbuda.
Antigua and Barbuda is an island country in the West Indies, lying between the Caribbean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. It consists of some small islands and then 2 major islands, Antigua and Barbuda, which are separated by 63 kilometres. The nearest 2 standalone sovereign nations begin with a D and an S. Like other island nations, Antigua and Barbuda faces environmental issues that include pressures on water resources and natural ecosystems, including that caused by invasive species. Existing issues on the island are further made worse by climate change, where, like other island nations, sea level rise and increased weather variability have a greater effect. Representing Antigua and Barbuda, our portrait subject is Dr. Brian Cooper, who has been a driving force for the environmental awareness group Antigua over the last 32 years. The path to finding Brian started with an internet search of Antigua and environmental. Almost all searches directed me to the organisation, the Environmental Awareness Group Antigua. I wrote to the group and asked them to nominate a subject, and after a week of deliberation, they unanimously decided they wanted to celebrate the contribution of Brian over the last 32 years. The Environmental Awareness Group, or EAG as it's most commonly called, is the longest standing environmental NGO in Antigua and Barbuda, having been founded in 1989 by a group of concerned citizens. Since its inception, the EAG moved from just being concerned citizens to taking action through habitat restoration and the rewilding of critical ecosystems. Pivotal to that work and to the continuation of the EAG itself has been Dr. Brian Cooper. Brian is a British scientist who moved to Antigua in 1986 and became very involved in the EAG in its founding years. Born and raised in Devon in the United Kingdom, Brian went to the University of Birmingham to do a BSc degree in chemistry with a minor in botany. After he graduated, he made the big step of going to the University of California at Berkeley in the San Francisco Bay Area to study soils and plant nutrition, and that is where he met his future wife Cleo, who was from Trinidad, and this led to the 2 of them relocating to Trinidad, where he was active in environmental groups for 15 years prior to arriving in Antigua. He served as the president on the board of directors of the EAG and still maintains an active role on the board some 32 years later. Working with local and international scientists, Dr. Cooper has helped to identify and catalogue species in Antigua and Barbuda and develop programs for their continued monitoring. He has also ensured that he has shared his knowledge with generations of environmentalists over the years, and most environmentalists and conservationists in Antigua can attest to working closely with him as he helped to guide research and project development. I asked Brian what his most memorable environmental action had been, and he replied that this was easy to select as it embodies so many things about environmental conservation work, and it has had such a positive and visible outcome. The story begins on the small offshore islands off the northeast coast of Antigua, where in 1995 Antigua's only species of snake clung on precariously to existence. Only 50 individual snakes were found on only one of the islands, and they were being badly attacked by rats. Many of those 50 snakes were injured by rat bites. Today, the population of the Antigua racer snake stands at over 1,000 snakes, and it is thriving on at least 5 islands. The area occupied by the Antigua racer has been expanded by more than a factor of 5, and it is no longer considered to be critically endangered. The project, initially called the Antigua Racer Conservation Project, developed gradually from a narrow objective of saving the racer from extinction to a much more comprehensive management of the island's biodiversity, which unfolded as the effects of the eradication of the invasive rats was accomplished, island by island. The effects of the eradication were dramatic. The snake population began to increase rapidly, doubling in a couple of years. The growth of the vegetation also showed a significant increase in vigour, and some plant species began to be seen that were not observed before. I asked Brian why this was the case, and he told me the rats were all the species Rattus rattus, which are omnivores and frequently are found eating agricultural crops, so it's not unusual for them to eat vegetation. One of the plants that recovered after the rat eradication has quite fleshy leaves and would probably have been a useful source of water. During the dry season, there would have been a severe shortage of fresh water on the offshore islands, so they were no doubt important to the survival of the rats. Here you can see a picture of one of the islands before and after the rat eradication. The islands had also always been important for nesting birds, hence its name of Great Bird Island. The birds soon learned that their nests were no longer being predated by the many rats, and more birds flocked in. These were mostly seabirds like tropic birds, terns and waders. However, even birds such as the white-crowned pigeon that normally nest on the mainland learned of this safe nesting spot and began flying over to nest in significant numbers. The snake population on Great Bird Island, or GBI, soon reached its carrying capacity, and it was obvious that the rats needed to be cleared from other neighbouring islands, so the surplus snakes could be transferred there. Surveys were done on the lizard populations in these adjacent islands to make sure the snakes would have sufficient food, and funds were sought to facilitate these additional eradications. By 2002, the EAG were ready to tackle Green Island, the largest island found in the southernmost part of the northeast coast. Green Island was very important because it was about 5 times the size of Great Bird Island and all the other islands put together, and it was privately owned. After almost 2 years of negotiations with the board of management of the company that owned the island, they agreed to allow the EAG to carry out the eradication and transfer snakes onto it. The transferred races prospered because they had room to expand, and soon the population was showing more snakes by the hundreds. Around this time, other issues were becoming important. Work needed to be done to monitor the ever-increasing number of birds nesting on the newly rat-cleared islands, and management of the recreational use of the islands was becoming an issue. More and larger tour boats were visiting GBI. Tourists needed to be monitored for behaviour in keeping with the conservation needs of the island. Litter needed to be collected and taken off the island. The EAG's work on this project became widely recognised, and subsequently the offshore islands became a protected area in Antigua. Final words from Brian he describes as rather sombre, but he thinks all of us from around the world need to wake up and look critically at what we are doing to the world. In Brian's words, mankind must learn quickly that despite our ability to do many things through the power of our technology, we will continue to depend on the web of life for our survival as a species. If this supporting web continues to be damaged by human activity the way it is being damaged now, mankind will simply become extinct and disappear from the face of this earth. If you'd like to find out more about the EAG and Brian's involvement, I've put some links in the description below. There is more information about this painting and how to get involved with the Global Portrait Project on the website and Instagram page and the links are, as usual, in the description below. Next time, we'll be getting active in Argentina.